Okay, hello everybody. So I'm grateful today that I'm having a discussion with Glenn, and he's going to be sharing his wisdom regarding being a billionaire and how anyone can be a billionaire. Um, so Glenn, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate your time and what you're about to share with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Obakeng.
So Glenn, let's start. Can you kindly share briefly your history, who you are, and your business, and perhaps share with our readers and audience what it actually feels like to be a billionaire?
Well, it was a billionaire on paper, and this was before this sort of the stock market took a decline. But on paper, I think I reached a little over $2 billion in net worth. It's now something below $1 billion. So I'm like probably somewhere around 450-ish or something like that. Still a big number.
Yeah.
The number that for me was the most impactful was, I think it was 2016, and the stock had reached a point where on paper, my net worth had went over 100 million. And that was kind of emotional because that's a big ass number. Like that's, so for me, that was like, I was like, nobody in my, immediate family or extended family or even extended family had reached anything close to that sort of net worth. So for me, I was kind of emotional for a couple of weeks actually, because I'm like, this is and keep in mind when I got in real estate in 2002, I was driving a used Ford Focus wagon. It had a chipped windshield and it had a burn in the driver's seat, and we were in pretty good amount of personal debt, and so there. My ex was on going to the grocery store with food stamps and things like that. I've been but I've been an entrepreneur all my life. So me, I've always believed that building businesses is more interesting than a typical job, and so for me that was probably the biggest piece. Is I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, wanted to roll up my sleeves, wanted to create something. And it was significantly less about the net worth. It was more about the potential of the idea, and if it worked, I knew it could do something. But if it didn't work, I would rather do something that didn't work than be a more traditional employee.
Yeah. Okay. What wonderful. Now, share with us when we talk about being a billionaire. In this book, we talk about the importance of the individual life, to say, before you can build a business, before you can serve clients, it's important that you as an individual, you must be whole, you must be complete. So here we're talking about, personal life, relationships, you being whole and well. What would you say about that issue of your personal space and personal being?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag, because I think a lot of times, and I'm still dealing with it, when you pursue your passion, your business, pursuit of income, money, wealth, net worth, sometimes other things suffer along the way. Okay. So my health went off the wagon a bit. In 2016, I serious bout of indigestion, and I pretty much had to go on a Prilosec or a proton pump inhibitor for about 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years I was on it. Okay. And I was trying to get off of it, and but it was and I gained weight and some other things that went along with it. So the part of it is that you do need to look at your whole self, because it's that verse, what profit of a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul.
Yeah.
And the same thing could be said about your health, right?
Okay.
Like what you can do is super well financially, but if you let your health slide,
Yeah.
and so there's a balancing act that if you can get it right, and obviously not everybody does. I didn't get it exactly right, but if you get it right, it helps in all areas of your life. There's a phrase that I often quote, which is how you do anything is how you do everything.
Okay.
And so for me, I pursue when I have a business idea or I have a health ambition or I have a whatever it is, I'm all in, and I'm there's no there's no sort of turning back and saying I'm not doing this. I'm going to figure it out,
Okay.
no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there is a balance for sure, but there's also an imbalance. I believe that in order to get into balance, quite often you have to live your life out of balance for a while.
Okay. So that okay. So at the moment, how would you say? What would be your advice on someone who wants to pursue a business and build it to billionaire status? What would your advice be regarding personal life?
Well, so one, to build something to that kind of net worth or business worth, it's more about, well, there's definitely a part of you as the entrepreneur that's part of that business, but it's the model for the business that ultimately will take it to where it's going. So I'll give you a few examples. Microsoft, they built the first operating system for computers, and the first one that was commercialized, and IBM partnered with them. So was it Bill Gates that built Microsoft? True, it was. The entrepreneur was involved, but it was because he had actually built a operating system. And in fact, he went and cobbled it together. He committed to the operating system and then went and got it and then sold it to IBM.
Okay.
So that's one example. Another example would be Netflix. Netflix was the first company to truly do streaming video.
Yes.
So it was the business model of streaming video that really propelled the company. Reed Hastings, important investor, thinking about the business, but he helped create a model for the business. You say the same thing about PayPal. You can say the same thing in the U.S. I'm not sure how big they are in South Africa, but Amazon, the first online seller of books, which sells everything now.
Yeah.
So the business model is as important, if not slightly more important, than the actual founder entrepreneur.
Okay. Yes. So you would say, I guess you're talking about building a specific business, and that is the next question I was going to ask, to say, how do you make sure that, how do you build a business? I guess the business system, would you say business model, business system that can service clients? Is that how would you?
Yeah. So I read a really good book back in the late 70s, early 80s, called The Entrepreneur's Manual. And in it outlined a set of questions to ask about an industry or about to identify a challenge. Okay. And so there's a basic phrase, a guy named Naveen Jain, he's founded a company called Biome. He came out of Microsoft, started the company, forget the name. Anyway, he's started multiple billion-dollar businesses.
Wow. Okay.
But he made the phrase. He said, if you want to become a millionaire, figure out how to help thousands of people.
Okay.
So if you want to become a millionaire, figure out a way. But if you want to become a billionaire, then figure out a way to help millions of people.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And if you look at each of the companies that I described earlier, each one of them has impacted over well in excess of 1 million people, sometimes tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And so the idea is that if you can, to become and if I think about real estate, because of course I found eXp Realty, we have, whatever, a $1.7 billion valuation on the stock market. But if you look at eXp, we serve probably about 500,000 clients a year, so 500,000 clients per year.
Yeah.
So if you sort of think about that, and you go, okay, so over multiple years, we're helping millions of clients.
That's it.
So you can kind of look at the idea that, will your business impact millions of lives? And if it will, then it's got the potential of being a company that's eventually valued at over $1 billion.
Right. You mentioned in the other interview that, we are in real estate, yes. And I think the phrase you used, you said, we are into the personal development space. How would you just clarify that, share that more? Yes, eXp, we are serving buyers, we are serving sellers. How are we in personal development space?
Yeah, so any sales career where somebody becomes successful, the individual at the core of that is working on themselves. They're learning about scripts and dialogues, marketing techniques, tools and technologies they can bring to their buyers and sellers. They're becoming a master of their craft. Okay. And in that's a personal development journey, because you're bettering yourself through learning, education, etc. There's also the mindset piece. So the mindset piece, a lot of times that gets sort of bucketed as personal development. Okay. Because if you don't believe that you can do something, then you probably won't even pursue it. If you believe that you can, then you'll pursue it. And belief, a lot of it has to do with your self-worth. It has to do with who your upbringing, who you've been around, those types of things. And so when I think about personal development, I think everybody has huge potential, way beyond anything that they personally believe about themselves or others. I mean, myself included. I'm sure I'm thinking relatively small relative to what I could. But the idea is that if you can get around great ideas, get around people who are doing more than you're doing, then you're going to up level. And that's the personal development journey. And so for us, we refer to eXp as a personal development company that just happens to sell real estate, because there's mindset coaching, there's training, there's scripts and dialogues, there's learning how to sell, learning how to market, learning all of these things by being around other real estate professionals, but then also others that are sharing, like myself and you, we share what we're doing, and that helps people who want to level up. And so the personal development journey is one of reading good books, getting around great people, and being exposed to great ideas.
Yeah. Glenn, I think you're touching on something very important there when you talk about the potential of individuals. In your mind, would you say anyone can be a millionaire, can be a billionaire? How would you answer that philosophical question?
Yeah, I believe that everybody has the potential. There's obviously certain people that have physical or mental handicaps that will limit their ability to be in the world. But we just had Nick Santostazo at eXpCon. Yeah. He's 24 years old, 25, maybe he's 26, I'm not sure. But he has no legs. He's missing one full arm. He has just a little tiny, basically this much of an arm. And he's running multiple $1 million a year businesses. So, so physically, he doesn't have near the mobility that you and I do, but he's figured out how to turn his challenge into a opportunity. And so he just recognized, he realized that if he simply chose to be successful, he would become an inspiration to others. And by being an inspiration to others, he created a business out of it. And so no matter where you're at, and this is one of the things I think about often, is if you come from really challenging beginnings,
Okay.
that gives you an amazing story when you make it. And so why not? So why not use your challenging beginnings as fuel to inspire others from your future place?
That's it. Yes. So I guess it's also important to say, who do you hang around with? What is the importance of that? In spite of where you're coming from, in spite of the challenges you're coming from, what importance would you ascribe to the people you hang around with, your environment, and things like that?
Well, it's an important component. It definitely shapes you in some capacity. Left to no other devices, you become the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. The nice thing about the world we live in today is you can hang out with people online who are more successful than you. You can consume information, books and trainings and other things. You can do that to fill your mind with good stuff if the 5 people that you're hanging around with are not the best. So trim that back and increase the inputs that come from other sources. So I just think about the idea that you get to choose who you have in your environment, and there's countless stories in your country, my country, all around every country in the world. Countless stories of somebody who came from really challenging beginnings and chose to be around the right people, chose to get the right content, get the pursue something so that they could get out of whatever their situation is. So you can think about upgrading the people you're around, which is always a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And some of them, with you upgrading, will want to upgrade themselves, so you can inspire them to upgrade as well. And so some of them may come along the journey with you, but always be thinking about, how are the people that I'm hanging around with, are they helping me go to where I'm going? Because if they're not, I will become like they are. And so
Yeah, very true. Very true. On the issue of your business engaging the market, what would you say is critical for your business to engage well with the market, the customers you want to serve?
Well, marketing is key. You mentioned the market, and the market requires the market to know about you. And so if the market doesn't know you exist, then for you, there is no market.
Yeah.
So the market is, to some extent, a creation of using your voice, social media, using tools that we have available to us to get to different people, so they know what our product and service is. In our case, it's real estate, but it's a bit of a numbers game. The more people that know you, and I'll quote a guy here in the U.S., Grant Cardone, they've got to know you if they're going to flow you, and flow you means basically that they're going to do business with you. So figure out a way for them to know you, so that when they think about your product or service or real estate, they think of you and call you.
Yes. Okay, great. In your experience, share with me the greatest challenge you'd say as you build EXP. What has been the greatest challenge you've had to deal with, and how did you overcome that?
Well, the biggest challenge, quite frankly, was that we knew we were going to be successful pretty early on in the history of EXP, but there was a period of time, and I think it's part of a rite of passage, where certain executives and others that were around the company thought that they were smarter than me, and they wanted to basically take the company and run with it without me. So I had to fight a little bit of a hostile takeover back in 2016-ish.
Okay.
And so that was probably my biggest challenge. Was that the second biggest challenge was probably in 2008, when the housing market had collapsed here in the United States, and my assistant had quit, and I didn't know why she quit because I knew there wasn't a lot of jobs out there given what was going on in the economy, and she didn't have the will to tell me that we were out of money and there weren't any closings coming in, and so we were broke. Now, I say that was the second biggest challenge because as soon as I knew where we were, I went and figured out how to solve for that. And 2 or 3 weeks later, I had enough money in the company to be able to get us into 2009 and then to plan the EXP business model. But it was that was probably the second biggest challenge.
Wow. Now, someone who is running a real estate company, and you approach them and they are thinking about, listen, and you're saying, and they're saying to you, listen, Glenn, listen, you know, I've got a good team. I've got 10 estate agents. I've got 20 estate agents. Why should I, you know, because the model is when a principal has a couple of estate agents, normally there's that 50-50 split, 50-60 split. What would you say to them regarding moving to EXP and they're having this challenge in their mind? How would you convince them?
One, I wouldn't try to convince, more just to share, maybe ask the question, what do you want out of your career? Like at the end of the day, do you want to build a business that you can ultimately retire from? And in my mind, most real estate professionals, even if they run a small team or a small office, their office or their team only works as long as they're involved. And so they have to think about, how do I scale this? How do I make it bigger? So eventually I can pull other people in to help me manage it. Yeah. And do I want to go through the brain damage associated with that? And that comes down to what's your business model, what are your systems, who are your people? There's a whole big thing that goes along with that.
Yeah.
Alternatively, you could look at hitching your wagon to EXP. We provide all of that infrastructure to actually allow you to scale, to build something that is much bigger than anything that you could build on your own. Now, maybe you'll take a little bit of a cut in your compensation in the short run. But if you're a dynamic leader and you're out there and people like and respect you and you're willing to share the opportunity with others, in a fairly short period of time, you'll overcome the financial, I guess we'll call it step back. Yeah. And then you'll be further ahead. And so I've literally seen this hundreds, if not thousands of times, where agents who came in with teams or brokerages or whatever are saying, hey, if I'm running my own shop, I get to keep 100% of the money. But then they've got the fixed bricks and mortar expenses, they've got the staffing, they've got all the other stuff. And at some point they kind of throw their hands up and go, why the heck am I doing this? So for EXP, it just answers a lot of needs that they will have. And if they can't solve them, or they don't want to solve them, because some of it means changing systems, it potentially means raising money, it means potentially getting new technology, it potentially means a number of different things that they have to do. If they're not willing to do those things, then could they continue to run their business the way they're running it and do fine for the next few years? Probably, but it will be harder and harder because companies like EXP will continue to gain market share and erode their ability to charge 50/50s and do some of the other stuff that they're doing. So yeah. It's just a question of, if they're early adopter, they get more upside potential. And if they're a late adopter, then that's okay too, but I'd rather be an early adopter.
Yeah. No, great. Glenn, this has been wonderful. Just two last questions before our time ends. Firstly, I've got a global question. There's a lot of people that, when you look at the International Labour Organization, they talk about unemployment in the world, how COVID has changed things. Would you say that the problem is unemployment, or would you say people have got a mindset of being unproductive? Do we have an unemployment problem, or do we have unproductivity challenge in the world? How would you respond to that question?
Well, so employment means I'm going to work for somebody else. It means that I don't have self-worth unless I'm actually going and getting a paycheck from somebody else. And if there's, and employers only have so much capacity, like they're running their own businesses. And so, I'll be honest, I've got fired from the two times I've been employed. I've actually got fired both times. So I'm not employable because I'm a self-starter. I'm going to challenge the status quo. I figure, hey, I've only got a short period of time on planet Earth. I may as well go for it and do something kind of meaningful. But that kind of aggravates the typical employee.
Okay.
But the flip side of it is that we don't have an unemployment problem. We have a mindset problem, because everybody who's unemployed is employed the day they become an entrepreneur. They may not make very much, but they'll actually be able to start to build something different than depending on somebody else to give them a paycheck.
Okay.
And so the gig economy, there's a lot of stuff that you can do nowadays to earn income in unique and interesting ways, especially online. I mean, online crazy. I think about, I think South Africa specifically has fairly low wages relative to the rest of the world. I think it's a fairly low cost to operate, but and cost of living is lower relative to other countries. So if you can learn certain skill, whether it be on social programming, what have you, we're hiring a lot of programmers nowadays out of South Africa, because one, they speak English, so we can communicate effectively. And so they think in a more westernized way, and so communicating is easier, and so to develop stuff is actually easier. So so for a individual who's quote unquote unemployed, learn a new skill, something that's marketable, figure out a way to actually get that out into the marketplace, and you shouldn't be unemployed for very long.
So we have a mindset problem. That is the challenge the world has.
Yeah, I think so, because I think once you become an entrepreneur, once you become a good salesperson, let's use salespeople. Once you become a good salesperson, you're never unemployed, because you can always sell something. There's always a need for somebody to have something sold. Okay. And so if you say, hey, I love your product or service and I'm willing to work for commission only, that you're employed. Now, sometimes you're going to need some minimum income to get between now, here, and there. But so there is a little bit of negotiation, but figure it out. It's I think that's the other piece. If you're unemployed, just figure it out.
Great. Last question for you, Glenn. For someone who wants to be a billionaire, multimillionaire, what would you advise them? Someone just meets up with you, say, Glenn, shucks, I really want to be a billionaire like you. What advice would you give them?
Well, if you look at people who've earned, basically become, high net worth individuals, they've almost all done it through starting a company. Okay. So, start a company. There's a number of reasons why starting a company makes sense. One, you can incorporate a company fairly inexpensively anywhere around the world. Then you own, in the beginning, you own 100% of the equity, but now you have another tool to be able to attract talent. If you've got a good idea, people can come in, and even if you can't pay them cash, you can pay them in equity or stock. And so using equity as a tool, there's very, very few billionaires, and probably none, if you actually figure out that they use the vehicle of a company where they own a large percentage of the equity in that company to do whatever it is that they did. So it could have been buying real estate, it could have been any number of different activities, but learning how to use the tool of a company and company formation to ultimately raise money, go pursue different business ventures. In my mind, that's the most important technical ingredient beyond your own mindset.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Glenn, thank you very much for your words of wisdom. We highly appreciate your time, and we look forward to chatting with you next time.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers, eh?